It was just after 6:30 in the morning. The air over Helmand Province already heavy with dust and diesel. Inside the command post at Forward Operating Base Anvil, the smell of burnt coffee mixed with the metallic tang of gun oil. Laptops hummed, maps glowed under red lights, and a group of Navy SEALs clustered around a table covered in satellite imagery. Staff Sergeant Raina Voss stood near the back of the room, hands folded behind her back, her M110 leaning against the wall. She had spent the last 72 hours staring through her Leupold Mark IV spotting scope at a stretch of valley that looked harmless on satellite feeds, but told a different story through her glass. She had seen the new fighting positions carved into the ridgeline, the dirt disturbed by boots and weapons. The pattern was textbook ambush. Senior Chief Marcus Webb ran the briefing, his voice steady, confident, the tone of someone who had led too many missions to question himself. The men nodded as he traced the planned route across the map. Raina's eyes followed his finger, and she felt her stomach tighten. The path ran straight through the valley floor, the same route she had marked in her logbook with a warning high ground on both sides. Interlocking fields of fire. No cover, no retreat. She cleared her throat, asked to speak, her tone calm but firm. She mentioned the positions she had observed, the grid coordinates, the movement she had logged. Webb didn't look up. He told her the latest ISR imagery showed the area clear. Maybe her scope needed cleaning. Laughter rippled through the room, quick and sharp, and then it was gone. The young naval intelligence lieutenant glanced at her notes for only a moment before saying it could have been shepherds, livestock, maybe civilians. She tried again, explaining that the enemy used runners and line-of-sight signaling, that the absence of radio chatter didn't mean safety. Webb finally looked up at her, the faintest smile touching his face. He told her to relax, that he'd been running ops in that valley since she was in high school. He turned back to the map. The briefing moved on. She stood still, staring at the glowing map and the faces around it. They saw a clean valley on a satellite screen. She saw the subtle movement of rifle barrels hidden behind rocks, the glint of optics in the morning sun, the memory of fresh tracks she'd marked 2 days earlier. Her fingers brushed the edge of her logbook, pages filled with times, wind calls, and distance estimates. Every note told her the same thing: they were walking into a kill box. When the briefing ended, the SEALs started checking their rifles and loading magazines. The rhythmic sound of metal clicking echoed through the post. Webb clapped one of his men on the shoulder and said they would be wheels up at 9. Raina stepped outside into the rising heat. The wind carried dust from the valley below, thin spirals twisting in the distance. She adjusted the sling on her M110, feeling its familiar weight against her shoulder. The base around her buzzed with energy, laughter, confidence, the kind that came before something broke. She looked toward the ridgeline, its edges sharp against the pale morning sky, and felt the same quiet pressure she had learned to trust in her bones. They would not listen. And when they left the wire, she knew she would be the only one still watching when the valley began to speak. The light in Montana had a different kind of stillness. She remembered mornings when the sky stretched endlessly and the air carried the smell of pine and wet earth. She had been 10 years old the first time her grandfather placed the stock of his old Remington 700 into her shoulder. He told her not to think about the target, to think about the wind instead. The wind would tell her when to breathe, when to squeeze, when to wait. The rifle cracked across the open field, echoing against the hills. Her grandfather, a retired Marine sniper from Vietnam, stood beside her with his weathered hands on her shoulders. He said that patience killed more enemies than bullets. She didn't understand it then. Not fully. But years later, those words became her compass. Now she sat alone on the roof of Forward Operating Base Anvil, the same stillness around her, only heavier. The Afghan sun had slipped behind the ridgeline, leaving the valley in a haze of gold and dust. She could see the patterns of wind shifting across the low ground, rippling like invisible water. 3 days of watching had taught her more than any imagery feed ever could. She wrote the data into her range book. Neat handwriting under the heading Hill 842, wind 5 knots from the west, temperature 91 degrees, visibility 4 kilometers. She had logged every movement, every heat signature that didn't belong, every shadow that broke pattern at dawn or dusk. Her M110 lay across her knees, its familiar weight grounding her. The 7.62 NATO chamber gleamed clean. She pulled a soft cloth along the receiver, checking for dust, then adjusted the Leupold Mark IV LRT scope mounted tight on the rail. The bipod was extended, the suppressor attached, every detail in place. She slid a magazine of match-grade M118 LR rounds into position and felt the click of it locking home. Each round was designed for precision, 175 grains of balance and reliability. She worked the bolt once, smooth and steady, feeling the mechanical confidence she had built through repetition. She had learned long ago not to expect validation. Higher ranks liked their systems neat, predictable, and easy to brief. A staff sergeant with too many opinions didn't fit that picture, especially not one who happened to be a woman attached to a SEAL task unit. The dismissive looks didn't sting anymore. What angered her was the waste, how arrogance blinded men who should have known better. The satellite images told them what they wanted to see. Her glass told her the truth. She had seen the trenches carved into the slopes, the footprints where none should be, the rhythm of movement in the valley that spoke of planning and discipline. They called her cautious. She called it survival. The wind picked up, carrying dust that caught in her hair. She brushed it away absently, still looking through the scope, tracking the ridgelines she knew by heart. The mountains out there held their secrets in silence, but she could read them the way her grandfather once read jungle trails. Patience, he used to say, is the deadliest weapon you'll ever own. Below her, the base quieted. The sounds of generators and voices faded with the sun. She closed her range book and set it beside her rifle. Tomorrow, they would walk into that valley. She knew it as certainly as she knew how to measure a crosswind. They would ignore the warnings, follow the plan, and step into a kill zone built for their destruction. She looked toward the horizon, the last light fading behind the hills, and felt the weight of the decision already forming in her mind. If the moment came, she would act, orders or not. She would not let arrogance write the obituary of 24 men she could still save. At 3 a.m., the desert was a living shadow. The air was cool, dry, and heavy with silence, the kind that pressed against the eardrums until even a heartbeat felt too loud. Down in the valley, 24 SEALs moved like smoke through the darkness, their NVGs glowing faint green. M4A1s and HK416s were slung across chests, suppressors fitted, safeties off. One man carried a compact M249 saw, its bipod folded, ready to drop into action if things went bad. Every footstep was measured, boots sinking softly into the powdery soil. Their patrol formation stretched in 2 staggered files, each man trusting the one in front of him to see the danger first. Raina Voss had already been in position for hours. She had left the wire before midnight, hiking alone up the ridge that overlooked the valley. Her climb had been quiet, slow, deliberate. Now, from her hide on Hill 842, she looked down through her thermal scope, the Leupold Mark IV LRT fixed to her M110 semi-automatic sniper system. The rifle rested steady on its bipod, suppressor cool in the early morning air. Her databook lay open beside her, notes scribbled across the pages in pencil. 4 magazines, 20 rounds each, match-grade M118 LR ammunition. 80 shots total. That was all she had to stop what was about to happen. Her hide was a hollow of rock and dirt, lined with a poncho liner and branches cut from scrub brush to break her outline. She blended into the hillside, unseen, forgotten, through the scope. She scanned the valley floor. Heat signatures bloomed against the cool terrain shapes that shouldn't be there. Fighters dug in behind rock walls, PKM machine guns positioned at perfect crossfire angles, RPG gunners lying flat with their tubes aimed toward the choke point where the SEALs were heading. Her range finder blinked back the numbers. 890, 910, 920. Every figure confirmed what she already knew. They were walking into a kill zone built to erase them. She thumbed her radio, voice steady. Overwatch to Trident 6. Recommend shifting north 200 meters. Probable enemy positions ahead. Multiple heat signatures. Silence for a beat. Then Webb's voice came through, flat and confident. Negative Overwatch. ISR imagery confirms area clear. Maintain position. She exhaled slowly, tasting metal on her tongue. The patrol kept moving, ghosting deeper into the valley, unaware that death was already waiting. Through her scope, she saw it unfold. A PKM gunner adjusted his tripod, settling his sights on the valley floor. Another fighter crawled into position beside him, feeding the belt into the receiver. The trigger line was seconds away. Her finger rested on the safety. She heard her grandfather's voice in her head. Patient, calm. Patience kills more enemies than bullets. But this time patience would kill her team. She flipped the safety off. Distance 910 meters. Wind 3/4 value from the left. Elevation 40 meters above target. She aligned the reticle center mass, let her breath out halfway, and pressed the trigger. The rifle bucked lightly. The suppressed crack echoed a heartbeat later. Through the scope, she saw the gunner drop backward, the PKM sliding useless from his hands. She worked the bolt, chambered another round, found the next target, the assistant gunner reaching for the weapon. The second shot hit center chest. 2 seconds later, another figure, a spotter on the ridge, fell. Each movement was muscle memory. Bolt back, brass ejected, fresh round in, cheek weld steady. Below, the SEAL formation broke. Confused voices crackled over comms. Webb's voice cut through the noise. Contact front, taking fire. The valley erupted in flashes of orange and white. PKMs opened from the opposite slope, rounds snapping overhead. Tracers sliced through the night. Raina's calm never broke. She called her targets quietly, firing with surgical precision, one by one. She eliminated the machine gunners, the RPG teams, the men with radios calling for reinforcements. Her suppressor hissed with heat, the rifle now an extension of her breathing. The SEALs hit cover, returning fire where they could. Her shots kept them alive, pulling the teeth from the ambush before it could close. She reloaded smoothly, the empty magazine sliding into the dirt beside her. Wind shift. She adjusted her scope 1/2 mil left, compensating for the drift. Her world narrowed to the scope, the valley, and the rhythm of her rifle. She could hear the roar of gunfire but felt nothing except the recoil, the soft click of the bolt, the pulse in her fingers. In less than a minute, she had fired 12 rounds, 11 confirmed hits. The valley that had waited so long to kill them was now screaming chaos. The SEALs regrouped, Webb barking orders over the radio, his tone now stripped of arrogance. The enemy began to break. Disoriented by precision they couldn't see or counter, Raina stayed locked in position, heart steady, hands cold. She had just broken the chain of command. She had disobeyed a direct order, but she had also done what she came here to do. The price of silence had always been too high. The first burst of gunfire cracked across the valley like a thunderclap, shattering the stillness of the night. Tracers ripped through the darkness, bright orange streaks weaving between the rocks. The SEAL team hit the ground instantly, years of training taking over. M4A1s barked short, controlled bursts. The M249 saw opened up with a deeper, faster rhythm, and someone shouted for cover fire as a PKM raked the ridgeline above them. Dust exploded in front of their faces, the air thick with dirt and gunpowder. The ambush was in full swing. Raina Voss watched from Hill 842 through the faint green glow of her thermal scope. Her pulse was steady, breath slow. The world reduced to wind, distance, and movement. Her M110 pressed firmly into her shoulder. Bipod dug into the dirt. The barrel radiated warmth she could feel through her gloves. She adjusted her scope, the reticle cutting clean through the chaos below. A PKM gunner popped up behind a rock, muzzle flashing. She shifted one click right, accounted for the wind that had shifted a full minute of angle since her last shot, and squeezed. The 175 grain M118 LR round left the chamber, a dull thud echoing back to her. Through the scope, she saw the gunner collapse, the machine gun falling silent. Another fighter moved into the same spot, dragging the PKM into position. She fired again. He went down before the belt even fed through. She worked the bolt, brass casing ejecting cleanly, chambering another round in one smooth motion. Her rhythm was exact. Shot, cycle, spot, adjust. The scope became her entire world, the crosshairs a metronome of life and death. Below, Senior Chief Marcus Webb's voice came through the radio, strained but sharp. Trident 6 to Overwatch, multiple contacts North Ridge, engaging now. Raina pressed her transmit button, voice calm and clipped. Overwatch copies. 14 enemy KIA, continuing to suppress. The SEALs shifted formation, moving toward better cover behind a dry riverbed. 2 men lobbed 40mm grenades from M203 launchers, the explosions lighting up the ridge in brief flashes. The M249 cut bursts into the dark, driving the enemy back. Still. Rounds cracked overhead. Some so close Raina could hear the supersonic hiss of them tearing past. She didn't flinch. She scanned left, spotting 2 fighters crawling along the ridge with RPGs. Range 820 meters. She dialed her elevation, felt the wind hit her cheek, and fired twice. Both targets fell before their launchers could ignite. The firefight raged for 19 minutes that stretched like an hour. Raina lost count of the rounds she fired, though she reloaded 3 times, each movement fluid and automatic. Magazine out, fresh mag in, tap, rack, reassess. Her ears rang from the distant concussions, her cheek pressed into the rifle stock, eyes locked on the scope. Every time the SEALs moved, she covered their flank. Every time a muzzle flashed on the ridge, she silenced it. The metallic scent of spent brass filled the air. Her rifle's suppressor glowed faintly under the heat. The SEALs' fire grew tighter, coordinated. Webb directed the team to flank right, clearing through a cluster of rocks that had been hiding the main body of the ambush. Over the comms came brief bursts of controlled chaos. Trident 2, move. Trident 4, hold that ridge. The rhythm of battle was fading, replaced by short volleys and the occasional grenade detonation. Through her scope, Raina could see the tide breaking. Enemy fighters were scattering up the hillside, dragging the wounded, abandoning their weapons. She tracked one last group as they ran northwest, then stopped firing. Overwatch to Trident 6. Enemy breaking contact. Recommend return to base. Her voice sounded steady, detached, almost too calm for what she had just done. Webb responded after a pause, the sound of his breathing heavy in the background. Copy that. Overwatch. Appreciate the save. We're pulling back. The valley fell quiet by degrees, the gunfire thinning to silence. Smoke drifted in slow ribbons across the terrain. The acrid bite of burned powder lingered. Raina stayed behind her rifle, scanning for movement that no longer came. Her hands ached from tension, her cheeks sore from hours against the stock. She finally sat back, the weight of her weapon heavy across her lap. Her mind caught up to what her body already knew. She had broken the chain of command, fired without authorization, and saved 24 men who would have died before dawn. She looked down at the valley, now still, except for wind pushing through the dust. The same wind she had measured, the same silence she had tried to warn them about. She exhaled, slow and steady, the way her grandfather taught her after every shot. The rifle beside her smoked faintly in the cool air, its barrel blackened, its purpose fulfilled. The war would move on, but this place, this night, would never leave her. By 5:30 a.m., the valley was nothing but a shadow behind them. The patrol had moved in silence all the way back to forward operating base Anvil, boots crunching against the hard-packed dirt, each man carrying the weight of what could have happened. The adrenaline had burned out long ago, leaving behind fatigue and the quiet hum of survival. When they stepped through the gate, no one spoke. They just drifted apart into the cold, fluorescent light of the operations building, eyes hollow, uniforms caked with dust. Inside, the command post felt almost sterile compared to the chaos that had filled the valley a few hours earlier. Screens flickered with live Predator drone footage, replaying the battle in ghostly black and white. On one monitor, 38 heat signatures could be seen lining the ridges in a perfect L-shaped formation. The SEAL's path ran straight through its center. Without the first shot from the hill, every one of them would have been gone before the first minute passed. The Navy captain, task force commander, stood at the head of the table. The JAG officer sat beside him, scrolling through radio transcripts, cross-checking timestamps. The air smelled of sweat, dirt, and stale coffee. Raina Voss stood off to the side, her M110 cleared and slung over her shoulder, helmet still tucked under her arm. She looked calm, but the dirt on her face traced the outline of the long night. The captain began the after-action review, voice low and precise. Every movement, every shot, every transmission was examined. Her radio logs matched the timeline exactly. Her warnings before the mission were verified by her range book, down to the minute. The JAG officer, reading from his notes, confirmed that her engagement fell under imminent threat to friendly forces. It was a lawful decision, justified and necessary. The captain nodded once, the kind of gesture that carried weight without needing words. Across the room, Senior Chief Marcus Webb shifted his stance. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he looked directly at her. His face was tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than before. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, stripped of rank and ego. He admitted that his arrogance had almost cost 24 lives, that her judgment and marksmanship had saved them all. There was no attempt to soften the truth. It just hung there between them, simple and honest. Raina gave a small nod, her expression unreadable, her silence louder than any reply. One by one, the SEALs approached her. No one laughed. No one joked. Each man reached out, shaking her hand with a slow firmness that carried meaning words couldn't touch. Their palms were rough, calloused, stained with oil and dust. Some whispered a quiet thank you. Others just met her eyes and moved on. It wasn't about gender, rank, or branches of service. It was about respect, earned the only way it mattered under fire. The captain ended the debrief with a single note of finality. He said he would initiate a recommendation for Staff Sergeant Raina Voss to receive the Silver Star. His tone was official, but his eyes said something else, the kind of respect that no medal could match. When the room cleared, Raina stepped outside. The desert horizon was just beginning to glow, the first streaks of morning light washing over the base. The generators hummed, and somewhere a helicopter crew prepped for another day. She sat on a concrete barrier, helmet beside her, rifle across her lap. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The men she saved were alive. The valley was quiet again, and for now, that was enough. 6 months later, the air felt different. The sharp sting of desert wind had been replaced by the soft humidity of a Georgia morning. The sun had not yet broken the horizon when Staff Sergeant Raina Voss walked across the firing range at Fort Benning, her boots pressing lightly into the damp red clay. The range stretched out in front of her, targets lined like quiet sentinels in the pale light. The faint smell of CLP oil and gunpowder hung in the air. The rhythmic click of bolts cycling echoed as students prepped their rifles for the first round of the day. This was the Special Operations Target Interdiction Course, SOTIC, where the next generation of Army and Special Operations snipers learned patience, precision, and the art of stillness. Raina moved between the firing lanes, calm and steady. She wore no visible insignia beyond her subdued rank patch, no decoration that hinted at what she had done 6 months earlier in Afghanistan. To her students, she was simply Instructor Voss, the quiet sniper with the steady voice who could read wind better than anyone on the range. She stopped behind one student, crouching slightly, watching the man's breathing as he lined up a shot. His finger hovered just a little too tight on the trigger. She spoke softly, her tone patient. "Ease it. Let the rifle surprise you." He adjusted. The shot broke clean. The target hit center mass at 700 meters. She gave a short nod and moved on. At another lane, she helped a student correct a wind call. They were reading crosswind at 10 knots, quartering left. She walked him through the math. 1 MOA adjustment, maybe 2 if the gusts picked up. She showed him how to confirm through his dope card, how to account for the Coriolis effect on the longer ranges they'd shoot later in the day. When the round struck true, she gave no praise, just a small look of approval that meant more than words. Her movements were deliberate, her calm contagious. The range became quiet except for the echo of distant impacts. Later that morning, she stood before the class for their first formal briefing. A row of young faces looked back at her, notebooks open, pens ready. She waited a moment before speaking, her voice low but clear. "The most important shots you'll ever take are the ones nobody ordered you to take." The line hung in the air. Some students looked puzzled, others thoughtful. She continued, explaining that courage wasn't about medals or recognition, but about doing what was right when the plan failed, when orders no longer fit reality. Leadership, she told them, was not about rank. It was about responsibility. That evening, after the students were gone, Raina stayed behind. The range was quiet, the smell of gunpowder fading as the light turned gold. She walked the firing line, her boots crunching softly on the gravel. The wind moved through the grass at the edge of the field, gentle and familiar. She set down her spotting scope, looked through it one last time, and watched the reflection of the sunset glint off a rifle barrel downrange. It reminded her of the valley, the silence before a shot, the calm before everything changed. She felt no pride, no burden, just peace. Courage, she thought, was never loud. It was the quiet decision to act when no one else would. And sometimes, that was enough.